Kung Fu was once a symbol of wisdom, discipline, and lonely journeys. But 54 years later, the greatest changes aren't in the story. They're in the cast themselves. Some vanished without a trace, others survived only to carry lifelong scars. Stay with us to uncover their real names, real ages, and the love lives you never knew. David Carradine as Keye Luke. David Carradine was born on December 8, 1936 in Hollywood, California, USA. At 36 years old, he played Keye Luke, the wandering Shaolin monk in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1975. He was the moral compass that turned Kung Fu into a cultural phenomenon. The role became the spiritual backbone of the series, blending martial arts with Eastern philosophy in a way American television had never seen before. But the calm wisdom he projected on screen did not come from a peaceful inner world. Carradine's early life unfolded in emotional instability rather than cinematic tragedy. Growing up as the son of actor John Carradine meant constant absence, fractured family dynamics, and little supervision, conditions that quietly shaped his rebellious personality. As he entered adulthood and began landing roles in the 1960s, discipline never fully replaced chaos, even as Kung Fu and later Bound for Glory, 1976, elevated his career. Fame, however, only amplified the cracks already beneath the surface. Carradine's personal life reflected the same instability. He was married 5 times, beginning with Donna Lee Becht, 1960 to 1968, followed by Linda Gilbert, Gail Jensen, Marina Anderson, and finally, Annie Bierman. Each marriage collapsed under addiction, infidelity, emotional volatility, and long absences, leaving strained relationships with his children and a growing sense of isolation. As the years passed, the consequences of that lifestyle became impossible to ignore. Decades of alcohol and drug abuse took a toll on Carradine's physical and mental health, fueling depression and increasingly dangerous behavior. Even a late career resurgence as Bill in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, 2003 to 2004, could not undo the patterns that had followed him for most of his life. Sadly, David Carradine died on June 3, 2009, at the age of 72, in a hotel room in Bangkok, Thailand, from asphyxiation caused by accidental suffocation during a sexual act. He was buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1.5 million, reduced by debt and mismanagement, closing the life of a man who taught serenity on screen but never fully escaped his own turmoil. Philip Ahn as Master Khan. Philip Ahn was born on March 29, 1905, in Highland Park, Los Angeles, California, USA. At 67 years old, he played Master Khan, the wise Shaolin teacher in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1975. Though appearing mainly in flashbacks, his character shaped the philosophical soul of the series. Master Khan gave depth, restraint, and spiritual weight to Kane's journey. That quiet authority was forged long before television cameras found him. Ahn's early life was marked by endurance rather than rebellion. Growing up as a Korean American during an era of open racial discrimination, he learned to survive within rigid boundaries. Beginning his career in the 1930s, he was repeatedly confined to stereotypical roles, yet films like The Good Earth, 1937, and Back to Baton, 1945, showed how he infused dignity into every appearance. Unlike many actors of his generation, Ahn chose solitude over domestic complexity. He never married and had no children, devoting himself to acting and to advocacy for the Korean American community. However, as he aged, his life grew increasingly quiet, defined more by reflection than companionship. Time, however, brought physical limits even discipline could not overcome. In his later years, Ahn's health declined, and surgery for a lung biopsy triggered serious complications. Pneumonia followed, weakening a body that had endured decades of labor, prejudice, and perseverance without public complaint. Finally, Philip Ahn passed away on February 28, 1978, at the age of 72 in Los Angeles, California, due to pneumonia following surgical complications. He was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills. His estimated net worth was around $300,000, modest for a career spanning over 50 years, but his true legacy remains immeasurable. As the first Korean-American actor in Hollywood and the spiritual anchor of Kung Fu. Radames Pera, as young Kane. Radames Pera was born on September 14, 1960, in New York City, USA. At 12 to 15 years old, he played young Kane, the teenage version of the protagonist in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1975. Appearing frequently in flashbacks, his portrayal gave emotional depth to Kane's past and humanized the master in training. Through him, audiences learned where discipline, doubt, and patience truly began. That responsibility arrived early. Pera's childhood was not marked by overt tragedy, but by pressure, working long hours in television while other children lived ordinary lives. Discovered young and pushed quickly into professional acting, he learned structure before freedom. Alongside Kung Fu, roles in Little House on the Prairie helped solidify his presence, but childhood fame came at the cost of a normal adolescence. As adolescence ended, the path narrowed. Like many child actors of his era, Pera struggled with the transition into adult roles. After appearances in films such as Red Dawn, 1984, opportunities diminished, not for lack of talent, but for lack of space in an industry that rarely waited. Gradually, he stepped away from acting, choosing stability over uncertainty. Reinvention followed where visibility faded. Pera redirected his skills into sound engineering and home theater design, building a successful business behind the scenes. Marriage brought balance, first briefly, then more enduringly with Anne-Sophie Ano, whom he married in 2015. Away from cameras, his life settled into quiet craftsmanship rather than performance. Today, Radames Pera is 66 years old and living a private life in Europe. His estimated net worth is around $1 million, earned through decades of technical work rather than fame. While his screen time ended long ago, his legacy remains unmistakable. Keye Luke as Master. Po. Keye Luke was born on June 18, 1904 in Canton, Guangzhou, China, and grew up in Seattle, Washington. At 68 to 71 years old, he played Master Po, the blind Shaolin monk in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1975. Appearing mainly in flashbacks across roughly 20 to 30 episodes, Master Po served as Kane's primary spiritual mentor. His gentle authority and quiet wisdom gave the series its emotional heart and philosophical continuity. That serenity was earned, not inherited. Luke's childhood was shaped by migration and discrimination, as his family struggled to survive in an America hostile to Asians. Financial hardship forced him to work early, while social exclusion taught him restraint and observation. Those qualities later flowed naturally into his acting, first as #1 son in the Charlie Chan films, and decades later into the stillness that defined Master Po. Success, however, never erased solitude. Luke married Ethel Davis in 1942, and they remained together until her death in 1979. They had no children, and after losing his wife, Luke's personal world grew quieter. While audiences embraced him in later roles like Gremlins, 1984, and remembered him fondly from The Green Hornet, his private life narrowed to work, art, and memory. Age eventually imposed limits that discipline could not delay. In his later years, Luke suffered declining health, culminating in a severe stroke. The same body that had carried decades of uncredited labor and dignified restraint slowly failed him, away from the spotlight he had helped build for others. Sadly, Keye Luke died on January 12, 1991, at the age of 86, due to a stroke. He was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California. His estimated net worth was about $500,000, consisting mainly of his home and an art collection, modest by Hollywood standards. But his legacy endures as one of quiet influence, a teacher who shaped kung fu not with force, but with stillness. Carradine as teenage Kane. Carradine was born on August 8, 1949 in San Mateo, California, USA. At 23 to 24 years old, he played teenage Kane, the younger incarnation of Kwai Chang Caine in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1973. Appearing in select flashbacks, his performance bridged the innocence of youth with the discipline of the future master. These moments quietly deepened the mythology of Caine, showing how restraint and moral conflict were formed long before adulthood. That tension mirrored Carradine's own upbringing. Raised in a deeply unstable household marked by emotional volatility and violence, his childhood closely resembled that of his older brother David. Chaos was normalized early, and creativity became both refuge and escape. As he entered acting, those inner fractures gave his performances a raw, introspective edge that stood out even in brief appearances. While Kung Fu introduced him to television audiences, cinema soon expanded his reach. Carradine achieved major critical recognition in Nashville, 1975, where he not only acted but won an Academy Award for Best Original Song, an unusual crossover that confirmed his artistic range. Films like The Duelists, 1977, followed, earning him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor and cementing his reputation as a serious dramatic actor rather than a television footnote. Behind the accolades, his personal life proved less stable. Carradine married twice and had children, but both marriages ended in divorce, leaving long periods of emotional strain. Balancing creative ambition with family life became an ongoing challenge, one that echoed the restlessness visible in many of his performances. Now, Carradine is 77 years old and still active in the entertainment industry. With an estimated net worth of around $6 million, built through decades of film, television, music, and stage work, he stands as the quieter Carradine brother. Benson Fong as Han Fei. Benson Fong was born on October 10, 1916, in Sacramento, California, USA. At 56 years old, he appeared as Han Fei in Kung Fu, 1972. Though a supporting character, his presence added authenticity and quiet tension to the series' depiction of Chinese authority figures. His role reflected the grounded, lived-in realism that helped Kung Fu feel culturally textured rather than theatrical. That restraint was shaped early in life. Growing up Chinese-American during an era of open racial discrimination, Fong learned to endure limitation without complaint. Economic pressure forced him into work early, and survival took priority over ambition. Those experiences followed him into Hollywood, where he entered the industry almost by accident during World War II, later gaining recognition in the Charlie Chan series and films such as Flower Drum Song, 1961. Stability at home did not guarantee peace. Fong married Gloria Chin, and together they raised 5 children, but financial strain placed constant pressure on the marriage. Supporting a large family while navigating inconsistent acting work created tension that never fully disappeared, even as his career diversified into television and film appearances. As opportunities fluctuated, reinvention became necessary. Fong gradually shifted focus toward entrepreneurship, opening the successful Ah Fong's restaurant chain in California. While acting roles became less frequent, the physical demands of long hours and age began to affect his health, quietly narrowing his world. Sadly, Benson Fong died on August 1, 1987, at the age of 70, due to a stroke in Los Angeles, California. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1 million, built from decades of acting and restaurant ownership. He left behind not fame, but something rarer: longevity earned through persistence in an industry that rarely offered Asian actors security. James Hong as Chun Yin. James Hong was born on February 22, 1929, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. At 43 to 46 years old, he appeared as Chun Yin, a recurring character in Kung Fu, 1972 to 1975. Though not a central figure, his presence reinforced the series' moral universe, adding cultural authenticity and quiet gravity to multiple episodes. His role reflected the show's broader commitment to philosophical depth over spectacle. That dignity was forged early through adversity. Born to Chinese immigrant parents, Hong spent his childhood navigating racism, isolation, and cultural displacement. Often the only Asian student in his classrooms, he endured bullying and alienation, experiences that sharpened both resilience and self-awareness. Those early struggles would later inform the patience and composure he brought to his roles. Rather than limiting him, perseverance multiplied opportunity. Hong went on to build one of the most prolific careers in Hollywood history, appearing in over 500 film and television projects. From Chinatown, 1974, and Blade Runner, 1982, to Big Trouble in Little China, 1986, he became instantly recognizable, while later generations embraced his voice work in Kung Fu Panda as Mr. Ping. Recognition came late, but powerfully, with a Hollywood Walk of Fame star in 2022 and a SAG Award for Everything Everywhere all at once. Unlike many peers, his private life remained remarkably stable. Hong married Susan Tong in 1977, and their long-lasting marriage produced 3 daughters and a large extended family. While his professional life was relentless, his home life offered continuity and grounding. As of 2026, James Hong is 97 years old and still living. With an estimated net worth of $5 million, his wealth reflects longevity rather than excess. More importantly, his legacy stands as historic. Not just a survivor of Hollywood's exclusions, but one of the artists who outlasted them and quietly changed the industry from within. Richard Liu as Master's son. Richard Liu was born on October 1, 1903, in Maui, Hawaii, USA. At 69 years old, he appeared as Master's son in Kung Fu, 1972. His calm authority and disciplined presence reinforced the show's philosophical tone, particularly in episodes centered on training and moral instruction. Though brief, his role aligned perfectly with Kung Fu's meditative rhythm. That composure was forged through hardship. Born to an immigrant family and raised in poverty, Liu's early years were shaped by economic struggle and cultural displacement. After moving to California and graduating from UC Berkeley, his original business career collapsed with the Great Depression, forcing him to rebuild from nothing. Acting became not a dream, but a necessity. Hollywood offered work, but rarely respect. Liu appeared in over 120 films, often typecast as stern villains or enemy officers during World War II. Roles in films like The Sand Pebbles, 1966, and later The Man with the Golden Gun, 1974, kept him visible, yet confined. He accepted these roles with pragmatism. At home, life carried its own weight. Liu married Bessie Sue Liu, with whom he had 3 children, but constant racial pressure and career instability strained family life. After their separation, he later found steadier companionship with his second wife, Hope, remaining with her until his death. Tragically, Richard Liu passed away on November 20, 1983, at the age of 80, from a cerebral hemorrhage. His estimated net worth was around $500,000, modest for a career spanning 5 decades. He was remembered not for stardom, but as one of Hollywood's most enduring Asian character actors. Victor Sen Yung as Tamo. Victor Sen Yung was born on October 18, 1915, in San Francisco, California, USA. At 57 years old, he appeared as Tamo in Kung Fu, 1972. His performance grounded the series' flashback-heavy storytelling. It also reinforced Kung Fu's attempt to portray Chinese characters with continuity and lived experience rather than caricature. That grounded tone was shaped by loss and displacement. Sen Yung's childhood was marked by immigration hardship and tragedy when his mother died during the 1919 flu epidemic, forcing him and his sister into a children's shelter. These early disruptions fostered emotional restraint and resilience. He entered Hollywood during an era of rigid racial boundaries, eventually finding steady recognition in the Charlie Chan films and later on Bonanza. Professional success did not translate into lasting intimacy. Sen Yung's marriage was brief and ended quietly, and he never had children. Friends later noted that long shooting schedules and an unsettled personal rhythm made sustained relationships difficult. Much of his emotional investment instead flowed into work, cooking, and writing. Even survival came with scars. In 1972, the same year he appeared on Kung Fu, Sen Yung survived a traumatic plane hijacking in which he was shot in the lower back. Though he recovered, the incident left lingering physical pain and further narrowed his already fragile private life. Finally, Victor Sen Yung died in his North Hollywood home in late October 1980, with his body discovered on November 9, 1980, at the age of 65, due to accidental natural gas poisoning. His estimated net worth was about $250,000, reflecting a long but uneven career. He was buried at Green Lawn Memorial Park, remembered as a familiar face of classic television. John Carradine as Reverend Serenity Johnson. John Carradine was born on February 5, 1906 in New York City, USA. At 66 years old, he appeared as Reverend Serenity Johnson in Kung Fu, 1972. His gravely voice and weathered presence lent spiritual gravity to the series, reinforcing its recurring themes of morality, suffering, and redemption. Though brief, the role echoed the preacher archetypes he had embodied throughout his career. That voice was forged in hardship. Carradine's father died of tuberculosis when he was just 2, and his childhood was marked by poverty, abuse, and instability. These early wounds followed him into adulthood, shaping a restless temperament. Still, his talent carried him into classics like Stagecoach, 1939, and The Grapes of Wrath, 1940, where his intensity found lasting recognition. His private life, however, unraveled repeatedly. Carradine married 4 times, to Ardenelle McCool, Sonia Sorel, Doris Grimshaw, and Emily Cisneros, and fathered 5 children, including David and Keith Carradine. These marriages were marked by scandal, custody battles, estrangement, and emotional neglect, leaving deep scars on both him and his children. As the years advanced, the body began to fail. Crippling rheumatoid arthritis plagued Carradine in his final decade, forcing him into low-budget films to sustain himself financially. Despite illness, he continued working relentlessly, driven by necessity and pride rather than comfort. Sadly, John Carradine died on November 27, 1988, at the age of 82 in Milan, Italy, from heart and kidney failure. His estimated net worth was around $500,000, modest for a man with more than 350 screen credits. He was buried at sea between the California coast and Catalina Island, leaving behind a towering legacy and a family still wrestling with his shadow. Robert Carradine as Sonny Jim. Robert Carradine was born on March 24, 1954, in Hollywood, California, USA. At 18 years old, he played Sonny Jim in Kung Fu, 1972. Though the role was small and largely silent, his presence added emotional texture to the episode Dark Angel. Appearing alongside his father, John Carradine, the role quietly reinforced the show's recurring theme of fractured families. That emotional restraint reflected his own early life. Raised amid the turbulence of the Carradine household, Robert experienced divorce, custody battles, and time spent in a home for abused children. Stability came late, and acting arrived early. By his teens, he was already working steadily, making his film debut in The Cowboys, 1972, before gradually expanding his range. As adulthood arrived, his career finally found an identity. After years of supporting roles, Carradine broke through as Louis Skolnick in Revenge of the Nerds, 1984, a performance that transformed him into an unlikely comedy icon. Later, he reached a new generation as Sam McGuire on Lizzie McGuire, proving his adaptability across decades. His private life, in contrast, sought calm rather than chaos. Carradine married Edie Mani, and they had children together, though the marriage eventually ended. Fatherhood became a grounding force, especially through his relationship with his daughter, Ever Carradine, who followed him into acting, creating a gentler continuation of the family legacy. As of 2026, Robert Carradine is 72 years old and continues to work intermittently in film, television, and fan conventions. His estimated net worth is around $3 million, earned through long-running franchises and steady television work. Unlike earlier generations of his family, he carved out longevity through balance rather than excess. Tim McIntire as Daniel Kane. Tim McIntire was born on July 19, 1944, in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 29 years old, he played Daniel Kane in Kung Fu, 1973. As the long-lost brother of Kwai Chang Caine, his role deepened the show's emotional core, shifting the story from philosophy to blood ties. His appearances gave the series a rare sense of unresolved family consequence. That intensity was rooted in expectation. Born to respected actors John McIntire and Jeanette Nolan, Tim grew up under constant artistic pressure. Talent was assumed, not praised. He worked relentlessly to prove himself, balancing acting with music and composition, gradually building credibility in films like The Gumball Rally, 1976. Recognition finally followed, but not relief. McIntire earned acclaim portraying Alan Freed in American Hot Wax, 1978, later reinforcing his reputation in Brubaker, 1980. Behind the scenes, however, addiction and exhaustion took hold, quietly eroding both health and stability even as his resume expanded. His personal life mirrored this imbalance. McIntire married twice, first to Kelly Jean Peters, then to Margaret M. O'Neill, with both marriages ending in divorce or tragedy. Relationships struggled under the weight of substance abuse and financial strain, leaving him increasingly isolated despite professional respect. Sadly, Tim McIntire died on April 15, 1986, at just 41 years old, from congestive heart failure in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth was around $200,000, diminished by medical issues and inconsistent income. He was buried at Tobacco Valley Cemetery in Montana, remembered as a gifted, restless talent whose promise burned faster than his body could endure. Leslie Nielsen as Vincent Corbino. Leslie Nielsen was born on February 11, 1926, in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. At 49 years old, he played Vincent Corbino in Kung Fu, 1975. Though a guest role, his calm authority and restrained intensity fit seamlessly into the series' meditative tone. It reinforced Nielsen's long-standing image at the time as a serious, disciplined, dramatic actor. That discipline was forged early and painfully. Nielsen grew up in a tense household dominated by an abusive father, a Royal Canadian mounted police officer whose violence left lasting emotional scars. Acting became both refuge and escape. By the 1950s and 1960s, Nielsen was working relentlessly in television and film, building credibility through dramatic roles such as Forbidden Planet and later The Poseidon Adventure. Yet his career would be reborn in a way no one expected. After decades of being typecast as a stern leading man, Nielsen shocked Hollywood with his deadpan comedy in Airplane, 1980. That single performance transformed him into a global icon, leading to massive success with the Naked Gun series and even an Emmy nomination for Police Squad, proving reinvention was possible even late in life. Behind the laughter, his personal life remained complicated. Nielsen married 4 times: Monica Boyar, Alessandra Ullman, Brooks Oliver, and finally Barbary Earl, and had 2 daughters. Each marriage carried strain, shaped by long absences, career pressure, and the emotional residue of his upbringing. Stability came only in his later years, when work slowed and reflection deepened. Finally, Leslie Nielsen died on November 28, 2010, at the age of 84, from pneumonia, passing peacefully in his sleep in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He left behind an estimated net worth of $20 million, earned across 6 decades, and more than 220 roles. He is buried at Evergreen Cemetery, his gravestone famously reading, "Let her rip," a final, gentle joke from a man who turned private pain into timeless laughter. 54 years have passed, and the faces we once knew from Kung Fu now carry the weight of time, loss, survival, and quiet resilience. Some walked away in silence, some faded too soon, and others found unexpected peace beyond the spotlight. Their journeys remind us that the real battles were never only on screen. So which cast member's story shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us as we uncover more then and now stories that time can't erase.